Hello, my name is Nandi Comer, and I am connecting with you from Detroit, the land of the Anishinaabe people. And I am very excited to welcome you all to the Allied Media Project's Seeds Fall series. Today's event is called Wisdom of Small Joys. And I'm just so excited that we get to share this space today with Ross and Adrienne Maree Brown. This event is live captioned, and we have ASL interpretation, and the recording will become available on AMP's YouTube channel in a little bit. So we encourage you during this session to share your questions. We're going to be asking a lot of things of our guests today, but also share your love, say hi. Say hi to your friends in the chat. I'm sure there are a lot of people in there that you all recognize, and then maybe make some new friends. But today, we're going to get the whole thing started. Before we start, we're going to start with Ross. Ross is going to share a poem.
Hey, it's good to be with you all. I'm glad to join you. And I'm going to read this. It's actually a little essay. Is that okay? It's very short. And it's called Pulling Carrots. It's from this book called The Book of Delights. Pulling carrots. Today we pulled the carrots from the garden. So let me just tell you real quick that the way this book came about is just like, I was like having a nice day one day, and I was like, oh, I'm going to write a little essay about this nice moment. And then I said, well, let me write an essay, like quick, boom, a bird flew in my ear and said, no, write an essay every day for a year about something that delights you. Do that. So that's what I did. And this is one of the essays that bird told me to write. Pulling carrots. Today we pulled the carrots from the garden that Stephanie sowed back in March. She planted two kinds, a red kind shaped like a standard kind, and a squat orange kind with a French name, a kind I recall the packet calling a market variety, probably because, like the red kind, it's an eye catcher, and sweet, which I learned nibbling a couple of both kinds like Bugs Bunny as I pulled them. The word kind, meaning type or variety, which you have noticed I have used with some flourish, is among the delights, for it puts the kindness of carrots front and center in this discussion, good for your eyes, yummy, etc., in addition to reminding us that kindness and kin have the same mother, maybe making those to whom we are kind our kin, to whom even those we might be. And that circle is big. These are kinds, I am thinking, as I snip the feathery green tops, making my way through the pile, holding the root in one hand, feeling the knobs and grains, the divots where they've grown against a rock or some critter nibbled, or the 4 or 5 of the red kind that have almost become 2 carrots, carrot legs in need of some petite pantaloons. The utterly forgettable magic of the carrot, which applies as well to the turnip and radish and potato and garlic and onion and ginger and turmeric and yam and sunchoke and shallot and salsify and maca and sweet potato, is that because so much of the food resides under the ground, it probably had to be uncovered. And after the discovering and the uncovering, choosing which ones to replant and replant and replant and replant and replant and replant and replant until there was the long red kind I'm brushing the soil from, until the squat kind piling up at the bottom of the basket. It was kindness. They are our family.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for kicking us out that way. That's definitely the way that I think of this work that you all do. There's a kindness in the way that both you and Adrienne write and you share with the world. And also you started us off with something that I was already going towards when I was thinking about preparing for this, and that is within the natural world and how you two, I just have to say, I've been thinking about having you all talk to each other for a long time. And part of it is because I've been thinking about how nature shows up, how it doesn't just show up, it drives you all's work, but very differently. And so I wanted you all to speak to that, but also in thinking about how it also feels like a fleeting thing for a lot of us as readers. So how do you, as writers who are constantly your day to day, how are you finding ways to come back into that smallness of nature to drive the work that you find most important in your practice?
Well, first of all, I just had to say hi. I am very excited to be here. I'm a fan of both of your work and have you on my bookshelf. I pulled your book down today, Ross, and was just sitting with it. And I was there when y'all were talking a little while back when Nandi's last book came out. And I was in a bathtub watching y'all talk and being like, when I grow up, I want to be talking with them. So all my dreams are coming true right now. And I love this question. I recently moved, as you know, from Detroit after 12 years of being there down to Durham, North Carolina. And my life right now is very much around nature, like being in a relationship with nature, in part because my sweetheart is a first grade teacher and we have a tortoise. And she previously was the one who took care of the tortoise most of the time. But now she leaves the house at 6:30 in the morning. And the tortoise isn't really ready to like do their thing until like 10. And at 10, I take them outside and I have to be aware of, is it raining? Is it a good time for the tortoise? Eventually we may get them their own house outdoors, but right now they sleep in the garage. And they're very, they're a tortoise who's been in a house with us during a pandemic. Like they're like, I like to be hand fed. Like they're a fancy tortoise. So we're experiencing the outdoors together. And I've never actually paid this much attention to the weather and like, did you poop? And what's the nature of that poop? And is that a good poop or not a good poop or all those kind of things? And I'm just like, it slows me way down to just be like, your care is in my hands and your environment. I have to make sure it's clean and it's good for you. And I have to make sure the sun is shining on you and that you're not cold, because they're cold-blooded. So I'm like, you have to be kept warm. So all of that is really shaping me. And I find that almost every time when I come in from being outdoors, there's a poem available or a song available that wasn't there before, right? That's just like, comes from, the other day I saw two cranes while I was out with the tortoise. These two cranes were in a mating dance. And one of them was like, I'm really not interested in you. And the other was like, but I'm so interested in you. And they just kept hopping around. And I was like, I want to write about the love story of that. I'm like, will the crane that's interested win? Will the crane that's not interested leave? Will they just have a brief affair? Like, what's going to happen with these cranes? So I feel like nature is providing most of my content these days. And it has been for a while, but now it feels more explicit, like more directly. And it's great.
I love that. I love that. I can't remember how you said it, but it was like when I was walking with the tortoise, I saw the two cranes. It's just like awesome. And it is, to me, it's like, it's interesting to think about the ways, if we're attending to, if we're paying any attention to the ways that our lives are made possible,
yeah,
which is like, like we breathe the air, we drink the water, we do all these things that are made possible, of course, at every turn and every second by, what we call nature, but what we really know is us. And it is like sort of, I think we have this sort of concern or love or fascination in common. It's a kind of mycelial understanding of like everything is fabric together. And so that for me, it's like, the part of my practice is to be like, of course, it's not always at the level of consciousness, but part of my practice is just to sort of remember, like, oh, right, this tree outside of this little studio is not like in a kind of theoretical way or hypothetical way making my life possible. This tree is my life, and so, I feel like that as as an attempt, as always sort of an attempt and an aspiration, aspire, breathe, as a practice, feels like it totally threaded through the work, because my work right now, I'm interested in the question of joy. And to me, joy has everything to do with those connections, I'll pause there.
No, that's great, because the next question is joy. So you all just shared some very particular moments about what is giving you joy, what brings you joy. And I think about how much coming from your own writing, we all walk away with this joy, inspiration, and we think about how we're going to go out and change. And so, in just like a very simple way, other than the tortoise and your tree, what is giving you joy? What in the work that you're doing right now have you turned and said, that's my joy right now?
Well, I'm looking at Ross because I'm I can't wait to hear your answer. I'm like, oh, right, I'm a panelist. This past weekend was my birthday weekend, and I turned 43. And I always do some reflection, right? I'm like, this doesn't matter to anyone in the world but me, that this is my marker for life, and my mom and my dad and stuff. And I woke up Friday morning, and I've written fiction, a long form fiction piece for the first time in my life is being published. And I was floating around all day because I received the box of books, and it means a lot. I've spent about 25 years doing some kind of movement work, facilitation. I was an executive director. I did all these different things, and I really thought I would spend my whole life there. But all along, there was this little voice that was like, you're a writer, and writing is what brings you joy, and you have to go do it. And it doesn't matter if you never make any money, and it doesn't matter if you have to do it on the side. And so I did writing, on the side of my life. I woke up early. I stayed late. I wrote while people were in small groups. I wrote. And I did my nonfiction that way. But fiction required a different focus. And getting that box of books felt like it feels emotional. It's emotional, the amount of joy that it produced in me. And I'm going to share this because we're here in the small joys category. I've always been an orgasm a day person. I bank it. I write about it. I'm like, this will make your life better. And after Friday, I was like, I don't need an orgasm a day right now. I went 2 days and I was like, I didn't even have an orgasm right now. And not for, I was like, I was just like, I don't even need that. I'm not even interested. It wasn't even not interested in sex or intimacy, but I was just like, I'm so joyful with the satisfaction of this experience of writing. And it never occurred to me that could be orgasmic in that way. I felt like I'm having a life-gasm, and it just lasted the whole weekend. And when the orgasms did come, they were great, but it was just very oh, this can be my whole life. This joy can be the whole container. And it's because I listened to the small voice, not all the accolades of the thing I was doing already that I was good at, but the small voice that was like, you might be horrible at writing fiction, but you still have to write it. You just have to. So that's what's giving me joy right now. And it's very, very present.
So beautiful. I love even thinking about when I think about joy, I think of it as being a way that we sort of disassemble into each other, and we become the assembly of each other or something like that. And in a way, I think maybe that's what what orgasm is, or it's a kind of becoming else, becoming otherwise. And it's a kind of merging. And I think of like, oh, right. So this new book in the world that you've been working with all this time, which is also a kind of gift. It's also a kind of merging, a gift from you and to you, from you, all these, it's a kind of, it's so beautiful. And I feel like that's what, as I start to think, as I'm thinking more and more about joy, I think that is one of the sort of components of it, it's like these moments where you're like, oh, this thing that I thought was this discrete me, it really isn't. And again, like the way that the light dapples into here is sort of constitutes my existence. It is not separate from me. Or if the leaves do something, you're like, oh, it's going to rain. Oh, that means we're, or the squirrel in the tree is like doing this thing with the squirrel's tail. It's like, maybe if I can't know what the squirrel's doing, but I know the squirrel's telling me something. We're talking. It's, sort of troubles that idea of the discrete self. But, I've worked with a community orchard here in Bloomington for years, and Nandi also worked when she was here in Bloomington with this orchard. But it's this beautiful project, and it's just a bunch of people like got excited about like making an orchard, and this young, she was a college student actually, kind of finishing an undergraduate project. She was like a grown, she was like 28 or something, and maybe she was 30, I don't know. But she was doing a thesis, and the thesis was on sort of food security and questions like that. And it was like the proposal was an urban orchard. So she, through various steps and labor, she was able to get this proposal for an urban orchard to the city. The city approved it. A bunch of people sort of got involved. And I was one of the zillions of people who were involved with this project. Which has been one of the really most beautiful and meaningful projects in my life, in part because it was this moment of sort of truly, I didn't know these people at all. And by the end, it was like, man, not only did I know them, like I loved them. And we were dreaming on this thing that was kind of impossible quite to imagine, but we were dreaming it together anyway. And the other thing that's so beautiful about the project was that we were, fruit trees they're a thing. It's like you don't get fruit off a fruit tree in a year usually, 5-10 years, we actually just put in some nut trees, and that could be 100 years to full production, which is hopeful. But fruit trees, it's like, 10 years down the road, they'll be in full production maybe. And so part of the delight and what I feel like is sort of joy of this project was that we were making this thing that we would very possibly never see the fruits of, actually. Whether it means we'd just be gone or whether it means we would be really gone, like gone in some other kind of way, which some of the people who were, involved in the project they're gone, they're no longer on this side. And the other day it was like blackberry time, and we were getting some blackberries and harvesting blackberries. And there were, not only were there like, grown people like harvesting, who I didn't know who the hell they were, but just like people roaming around harvesting and getting blackberries, and they're talking about, what they're going to make with their, so it's 10 years later. So we planted this in 2010, or we planted it in 2011. So it's 10 years. 10 plus. And so everything's in production now. The stuff that's going to die, the plum trees have some trouble, so those are mostly gone. The apples are big, the peaches are big, the blackberries are always abundant. The, Mr. Lau's figs are doing good, like the goji doing this, there were these people who I did not know who were eating the fruit that we planted, which was kind of delightful and like a miracle and like, holy shit. But even more, was that there were these, like some crew of kids like ran in there, and they were eating these blackberries, and they were like, what are these things? And they're eating all these blackberries, and they're kind of scared to eat them, and they don't know if they're, like, what are they, and this and that. And I'm just like, we did it. We did it. These kids I could never have dreamt of. They're eating something that we made, that we planted together, and it was given to us. That's one.
I just have to say, something I love about this is the writing process for the book I was just talking about was also a 10-year process. And so there's something here about the delight of fruition. And many hands worked on it. Many hands held it and fed back and believed in it and shaped it. And anyway, there's something there that is intriguing.
Wow, yeah. One, thank you so much for telling the story of the orchard. I remember shoveling compost in that stinky little field. So it's so good to hear, and I can't wait to visit it again. I'm thinking also, well, before we move on, I have to say the chat is blowing up. We have to just acknowledge the fact that people are showing y'all love. People are giving out, just responding. I see lifegasm in the chat. And so there's a lot of Tina Bartholomew here. And there's a lot of people in the chat. But I just, some people that we all share in common. So I just wanted to say hi to our community online, even though it feels like we're in this little small space talking to each other, talking to a whole bunch of people. And I want to invite you all too that's online to please ask questions. We do I have more questions, but I do want this to be participatory. So please share your thoughts and your questions. We will try to get to them all. And then towards the end, we're going to have Adrienne leave us with a spell. So don't log off just yet. We want to make sure that we all get a little bit of that blessing. So you were talking about how it's interesting how you're talking about the garden and planting seeds for future selves. And I always think about the futurist nature of gardening, of planting, the work that you're doing, and even like directly the work that Adrienne engages in with the Afrofuturism. And so this question is about the future and how you see, we have a struggle that we're going through right now, and how we're able to maintain our life and our livelihood. And I'm curious about how the work, what this futurist space is that you're trying to build. What is it that you imagine for the future in this? What is our next celebration in, 2090? What is our joy? Where are our joys being focused in our future? What is the future you imagine? Took you off guard on that one, huh?
I mean, that's a beautiful question, and it's a really optimistic question too. I feel like I can say for myself that I feel more and more capable. I mean, capable might be the wrong word, but more and more indebted might be the right word to other people for helping to show me how it is that we make each other's lives possible, And I feel like in a way that in terms of imagining sort of a future, I feel like I feel very much inclined to be like, we are always, I feel very much inclined to be like, we need to study our beloveds who have taught us how to beloved one another. That's what I feel like in all these ways that we often do not necessarily witness maybe we witness on a kind of small way, but we don't necessarily be like, oh, that's called making each other's lives possible, and by that, I mean the most mundane daily stuff. And I really mean when someone drops off a thing of canned tomatoes, I mean the most basic fundamental, elemental stuff that we do all the time, that we don't necessarily elevate to a kind of name, to maybe we don't necessarily call it mutual aid, but it's sort of perpetual, and it's all happening and we're not saying it, can I just, can I share this thing? Or, tell you, I see you're doing this. It's kind of heavy for you. Can I help? Like, boom, 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 And so in a way, like my just my question, I guess, is how will we just continue to sort of study that, and practice that and understand that in the midst of things. Yeah. I'll leave there.
I like those thoughts. My first thought also went to the mundane or to the simple. And just, I feel like I've been kind of astounded by how satisfying life can be when it gets simpler, and when purpose feels clearer, and when there's less dodging about in dishonesty. Like when you're just more clear, like you said, like, I see that you need help. And you can honestly say, like, no, I don't. Yes, I do. Like, whatever the truth is. And I feel like my mode of being a futurist right now is really being a nowist, like in a different way than I've ever experienced before. Like, something has really landed during this pandemic around how good control has felt to me, like trying to control others and control myself and control things that are beyond my control. I was like, oh, I can do that. And I think a lot of my futurist activity was actually trying to control the whole future. I was like, the current is out of control, but I can just control how people think in the future. Somehow, if I write a better story and I put out a better theory, and the pandemic has forced me to relinquish control. Like, the future is now, it's all happening right now. And the future is Octavia said it, right? Tomorrow is the child of today. Like, whatever will happen is from what we are being. So I'm really into, like, how am I being? Am I being honest? Am I being true? Am I being loving? I think about that all the time, with my partner, with my nibblings, with my family. I'm like, it transforms everything. Like, stop, like when I'm not trying to control them and I'm just loving them. And I thought I was loving them before with the control behaviors. And it turns out I was judging them and boxing them and kind of giving them a narrow role in my story, which is a human thing to do, is to give the whole world a very narrow role in our story. So that might be the other piece around my futurism, is I feel like I'm really decentralizing the human narrative in the future of life. Whether that means we evolve into a different species where love is able to be more central and our sensations and our feelings are able to guide us more directly into relationship and into action. Or if humans are not actually compatible with the earth, that the octopuses get to be the ones who are kicking it in 90 years and it's all good, I just recently got to watch Star Trek 4 again in theaters. It came back into theaters for like 2 nights. And I'm reminded that I had forgotten one part of the storyline is that there's this species that can come and that only speaks in a way that the whales understand. And the whales are extinct and they have to time travel back and find whales to come talk to the aliens or this other species, which is some form of whales. And I was so thrilled by it. I was like, oh, there's nothing new under the sun, as Octavia also said, but there are new suns. And I love that idea that there's other worlds and there's life, and it's our work, right? In the current time, I feel like our work is to become compatible with life, to become compatible with the earth by listening to her and dropping in, which is less bombastic, which requires less time on the internet and less time in performance, more time just being with others.
Yeah, I feel like that, dropping into the earth and becoming as we are the earth, and it's just that, that it feels like part of, if I were to, again, like part of the witnessing of something, is, the witnessing, or participating in or practicing the acknowledgement of that, how we acknowledge that, which is to say, like, how do we constantly and practice and all these other ways, witness and acknowledge that we are the earth.
Exactly. Right. So this iteration of earth, is so committed to being like, I'm not. And it's like, but I am. And, when I was facilitating, I used to feel this thing flowing out of the palms of my hands and flowing through my feet. And I would tell people, root down into the earth. But it's like, actually, now I understand it's the earth reminding me that I'm not disconnected, that it's flowing through me. And you can feel the weather systems that way. You can feel so much that way, where once you begin to feel, you can feel everything. And I know people write about this, that it's like, maybe that is the next evolutionary step, is simply remembering that we are earth and the sensations are the way we know that. And that can be really scary, if we have such a trauma legacy around harm and being like, I don't want to feel the sensations that might help make me remember that harm or open me to that harm. But for me, it's been so healing to be like, oh, there's so many other sensations. And actually, in a way, those sensations can flood my system and cleanse my system. So it doesn't take away what happened. There's scars, there's bruises, there's marks. And the totality, the whole, is reconnected. Yeah. Or never was disconnected, but now I know. Now I remember.
Yeah. And so often the scars are the detritus of attempting not to be the earth. It's the violence that arises from separating, right?
Yes.
Like, even think of like some of our particular histories of being, the descendants of enslaved people. That's like the earth had no part in that. It was, or unless the humans, were making their little mistakes, big mistakes, and by trying not to be the earth, inflicting this brutality upon the earth, which include
because it's that part, Ross. Like, you cannot. I don't think when you get connected back into that earth way, I don't think you can cause harm that is not directly tied to survival. I watch all my nature documentaries and everything, and I'm like, in the wild, like, the lion will kill the zebra, and the zebra might be mad, right? But the lion is killing that zebra to feed its family. There's a rhythm to it. There's a cycle to it. There's some respect to it. Only by disconnecting from that can you say, I'm going to cause harm that has nothing to do with my survival. I'm going to cause harm that actually doesn't personally benefit me in any way. I'm going to cause harm. I'm going to begin to get pleasure from harm. That's, to me, the ultimate disconnection. And I feel like that's what our society is swimming in right now. And that's what we have to recover from, right? Is like, those two things can't coexist. We actually have to untangle some things, right? And anyway, Nandi, we're going off, but we have to, I do feel like that's the work right now. That's why I'm like, I'm an abolitionist, like that's where it's rooted in. It's like, all of us are here. None of us are disposable. None of us are innocent. All of us are living and figuring this stuff out. And we have to do it in relationship with each other, not in domination and hierarchy over each other.
Yeah.
Y'all can go off. Y'all really going in. That's what y'all really doing, y'all. Y'all digging real deep, and I love it. So I have a lot of questions, but I'm gonna actually look to the chat for a couple of questions right now. There are several questions about your writing process, and so I'm gonna kind of group those together if the audience doesn't mind. It's a combination of Sarah Greenman, Carlotta, and Karina. They were all asking about both of your writing processes. So there's one question that's like, Adrienne, you mentioned each time that you write outside, you come in with a poem. Can you elaborate on how you connect your creative life to the rhythm of the seasons and Earth's natural cycles? And I'm going to also tack on a little bit of what Carlotta asked. Let's ask, what do you recommend to those of us who are still listening to the voice that we are not ready to write, experience joy in those pleasures because of the feeling of scarcity, or that, like, in terms of money and things like that. And then Karina asked, like, what methods do you use to consistently archive those joys? So those are associated in terms of writing processes, how you archive, what are your recommendations to folks that feel like they don't have the resources for continuing the writing process, and how is Earth's cycles influencing? How do those cycles influence your writing?
Sweet. I'm into this conglomeration of questions. So I want to start with the scarcity one, because this has been such a life lesson for me. As for the longest time, the narrative, the thing I was telling myself all the time is I don't have time. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time to write and to love and to be friends and to do all the work I'm called to do. And there's just not enough time. And I definitely don't have enough time to do earth things. Those move so slow. And I don't have enough time to like be in agreement with anybody because that takes forever. And so on, it's like a scarcity of everything. And my therapist was like, do you recognize that scarcity of everything is impacting everything? Like, so I had come up with this commitment for myself that was, I'm a small earth loving myself. And my therapist was like, there's nothing small about you. What is this commitment to small scarcity thinking? There's enough of you. And it was such a, one of those things that just clicked. I was like, oh, there's enough of me for the life I'm here to live. And I'm the only one who's here to live it. And there's enough of Nandi for the Nandi life and enough of Ross for the Ross life. There's just enough. But then it's about the choices we make, and the choices we make don't determine if we have more or less enoughness, but it's how we feel inside of it. I don't necessarily have more time of my life, but I have made choices so that I feel very spacious inside my life. So that goes to the seasons thing. And the writing in the seasons for me is like, in the same way that I trust the seasons, like I trust when fall is coming, spring is going to come, and I can just enjoy fall and be like, this is banging. Like this color palette is my fave. It's my birthday season. Everything's falling down. The Day of the Dead is happening. I can grieve. I can actually head into winter and see the beauty of it. I can trust all of the cycles to keep cycling. And even as climate catastrophe moves, I have to begin to trust the seasons will change, but there'll still be seasons. Things will keep shifting. And I have to trust my writing process like that too. I don't push a project ever. I don't push a piece of writing out. I trust things to come in their season. And I'll get obsessed with stuff. Emergent strategy was a season of my writing where it's just like, all I can write about is flocks of birds and bees. And this is ants. And like, I don't want to look at anything that's not a massive communal system of insects or whatever. And that was a season. And now I don't necessarily feel drawn to write about that as much. Now I'm really interested in how humans are doing all those things and how love is a connective tissue of all that. And, that season is here. And so now the writing is there, and there's a season of musicals happening. So when I'm trying to write a poem, now a melody shows up and it's like, actually, it goes like this. I'm like, girl, what's that? So that's a season. I can't be like, now I write musicals only. I don't know, but I have to trust that this is the spring of musicals, and it'll keep cycling around. And I have to relinquish the facing the mortality feels like such an important part of it that I'm like, I'm not going to live forever. And a lot of the people that I love have died, and I grieve them, both them, and I grieve the work that they didn't get to write or produce or make. Like that's a part of how I am. I think about David Blair, a poet that I loved, and I'm just like, I want more poems from David Blair, and I grieve that. And it makes me pay attention to my mortality, that I'm like, David Blair is a genius. and he's not here anymore, and it's not fair, and that's what it is. And I only get a limited time to give my offer. I better like listen to what is in season for me. And that's maybe the little last piece of it, is like being in season is what our body needs, and what that's what we should be eating. That's what we should be growing. Like trying to grow a mango in winter, it's like, that's not the time. So I'm always often listening for that too, is like what's in season in my own awakening and in my own life, in my mind. And I want to move towards what's ripe, and I want to figure out what I need to bury and when. Because some stuff will come, and I'm like, that's a good idea, but let me put it in the ground. And it's going to stew for 10 years. It's going to sit down there, and earthworms are going to poop it through a few thousand times, and it'll make sense after that. So that's my answer.
And I love that. And I feel like one of the things that I hear, and that I am so with you on that, is to like, even in terms of like listening to as the weather changes, as the days change, as the seasons change, as climate itself changes, it's still like it still requires that we listen. Even more than ever, it requires that we listen. And that feels, in terms of sort of a practice, like a writing practice, I teach writing, and I'm always like, everything I say, I'm like, I'm basically like, it's bullshit. What I say, I'm like, I don't believe that. I don't believe that. But the one thing that I always believe is like, be precise, be precise, whatever it is, be precise. But the other thing that I really believe is like listen, or be curious, or whatever, whatever the word is. Do not know before you know. And that feels so vital, just in terms of like a kind of creative process, but also in terms of like a process of being in relationship with people. Like, just, what, I love you so much, but I actually don't, I have to trust that I don't know you totally. And which is kind of terrifying and ungrounding. And it's also the most beautiful thing it's one of the most beautiful things about each other, and another one of the most beautiful things about each other is that we're going to die, and which kind of cycles back to me, this idea of joy. There's this quote, I think it's one of the speeches from Waiting for Godot, Beckett's play, and it's like, born astride a grave. Like, again, one of the practices I feel like, and this is connecting to everything that we're saying, and makes me think that as a practice, to sort of be perpetually understanding or reminding ourselves that our beloveds are dying and we're dying. Our beloveds are dying and we're dying. Our beloveds are like, and not our beloveds are dying. That so-called stranger is also dying. We're all born astride a grave. And then out of which what? To me, there is something radiant and luminous and profoundly sweet when we sort of walk the earth that way, when we are the earth that way, you know what I mean? It seems to me that it for sure is mycelial. It's like, okay, here's a sort of significant connection that we have. It's kind of significant, and like the mycelial, among what are the sort of fruiting bodies from the mycelium? I think among the fruiting bodies from that kind of mycelial approach, that we're all going to die, friends, is care. I feel very, very confident of that. It's care. There's obviously an opposite one, which can be brutality. But I think if we practice a certain kind of way, if we acknowledge that it is in fact among our truest connections, I think care and love, and actually, I think the radiance of that is actually one of my definitions of joy.
Ooh. Thank you for bringing Blair into the conversation. That this is one of our ancestors, a poet who really showed up at a lot of the LA Media Project's conferences, and just is a person that we all look to from AMP. So I didn't expect to hear his name. So thank you for bringing him into the room. And I saw in the chat that a lot of people were very appreciative of seeing him in this space. Thank you. So there are some questions that are asking about influences. And I had a question too, because I feel like anytime anybody asks me about who they should be reading about anything, and they're like, I'm trying to organize something, or I'm trying to write poems, or I'm trying to write joy. I'm like, have you heard of Ross Gay or Adrienne Maree Brown? And they haven't. And so I feel like I'm passing your book out to everyone all the time. I'm like, go look them up. You know, you need to know who they are.
Oh my God, that's what's been happening.
I think it's always important for us as writers, as readers, to know that the person who is doing this creation that is inspiring us has had their own familiars or their own ancestors or their own writing mamas and papas and babas and aunties giving them their inspiration. So I have that question for you all, whether it's somebody that you're reading right now or somebody that you're always looking to. Who are you? Who do you go to for your joy? Who are you going to for your influences? Who are the people that have helped to shape the kind of writing that you're doing?
Like Audre Lorde is, I have a quote, an epigraph to this one book of mine. Our children cannot dream unless they live. This is from Poetry is Not a Luxury, which is one of my most important essays, and uses of the erotic also. But our children cannot dream unless they live. They cannot live unless they are nourished. And who else will feed them the real food without which their dreams will be no different than ours? So, Audre Lorde, Morrison means so much to me. Jamaica Kincaid means so much to me. John Edgar Weideman is a writer who I am deeply influenced by. And for some reason, I had like some years that I wasn't reading him. And then, however, I was reading him deeply. And then 8 years later, in the last 3 years, I started reading him again. I was like, oh, that's how I learned to write a sentence, John Edgar Weideman, who writes about family, who writes about, fathers and sons, who writes about basketball. Really important to me. Lots of musicians are, deeply important to me in all these ways that I feel like I learned stuff, like language-wise, performance-wise. I'm really indebted, I think, to Erykah Badu in terms of a lot of, her music is really big to me. John Coltrane is really important to me. On and on. I have teachers. Gerald Stern is just a really important writer to me. Thomas Lux, Marie Howe, Yusuf Komunyakaa, Toy Derricotte. Toy Derricotte, I feel like, has shown me things that are, her poems and her book, The Black Notebooks. Rebecca Solnit's a really important writer to me. Saidiya Hartman, Wayward Lives, Beautiful Experiments is just, and Lose Your Mother, like those are both like such formative books for me. Fred Moten and Stefano Harney, The Undercommons is just like so much. I could go on and on and on. I could go on and on and on. Maybe I'll stop there. That's one of my favorite things, though, to just talk about like that kind of stuff. I mean, like, and also like Luther Vandross's cover of Dionne Warwick's A House Is Not a Home.
I was about to say, where Luther at? Because I know you love him.
I know, like all these versions, the version itself is an inspiration to me, like Al Jarreau's version of Blue Rondo a la Turk, and like on and on and on. It's just endless. Okay, I'll stop. The Wiz.
Don't forget the Wiz. You almost forgot the Wiz out here in these streets, Roz. Like, we weren't going to get over that. I love
I can't trust anyone who hasn't seen The Wiz, who doesn't know it. I'm just like, I can't trust you.
No. Or people who are like, oh yeah, anyway, I'm not going to get into that. I'm like, so I'm going to see if I can turn this and show y'all my ancestor altar wall. And can you see it, Nandi? Like, is it visible? I can kind of point people out. So it's like Audre Lorde, Aretha Franklin, Toni Morrison, Nina Simone, Octavia, of course. Grace is here. Blair is here. Maya Angelou, Prince, Malcolm X. That's some of the ancestors. It's still growing. But one of the things I started doing a few years ago is being like, who are the ancestors in the lineage of my work? Because as a displaced person, I don't always know all the ancestors in the lineage of my life. And so I have to imagine that the tributaries that were them somehow flow into me. And I recently found out this year, Imani Perry and I found out that we're third cousins, that we share an ancestor. And before we found that out, her writing has deeply moved me. It was a part of my sabbatical, her looking for Lorraine. And I also want to mention one of my very favorite writers who is not as widely published yet, and who is, I think, the best living poet. Her name is Janine Denovage, and people don't know her work, right? And then I would be remiss because we're on this phone call, and I have every single thing that Nandi Comer has ever written. And Nandi and I have gotten to work together for all this time, during which she has put out book after book after book after book that is incredible. And particularly, I'm like, let me pull it out. Because I'm like, this book changed how I write. Yeah. This book changed how I write. Nandi, and the reason I want to say this is because the thing I think you have in common with all these writers, and Imani has in common with all these writers, is not being scared to say, like, here is the actual truth. Like, here's the thing. And we can feel all kinds of ways about the thing. But I think before that, I often used to try to write around the thing, right? Like, oh, here's something hard, and here's all the stuff around that hard thing. And you were this, and I told you this when I was reading this, but I was like, I can't actually read more than one poem at a time. That's a remarkable experience for me. I'm used to consuming stuff like that. So those are some of the writers who influenced me. And you, Ross, your Book of Delights was a freaking delight. Like, I read it and I was like, especially for you writing as a Black man, I was so excited by the freedom I felt on the page of you just reclaiming, like, I am a human being. I am a human being. I'm an earthling feeling this delight. And that's Blackness. And that's everything. And I feel like that is right now, it feels so important because I think identity is being shaped, as the tiny lane of suffering that we share. And I feel like the reclamation that all of these artists have done has been like, oh no, identity is the place where we tap into the whole humanity. And we find out, how have you survived? Here's how I've survived. And here's what we're going to do to keep surviving. I feel like those are the writers who do that to me. Your face, Nadia. I love it.
Because y'all have like almost made me cry on so many moments. And so after I get off of this, I'm going to like just go decompress and kind of be all in my feelings, because I love both of you so much. And not like I love your writing, but we share these personal bonds, and I love you. Thank you for coming and doing this. We have to wrap it up. So I'm going to start to close it out. But I just want to, thank you so much, both of you, for sharing your joys, your influences, your letting us see these tiny parts of your lives. But before we're going to have a spell from Adrienne before we close out. But before we close out, I just wanted to do some acknowledgements to some folk that helped make this possible. Thank you first to all of our audience that logged in today. Thank you all and your comments. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of your questions, but thank you so much for logging in. We're going to put this video up later if you want to share it out or rewatch it. It'll be on the Ally Media Project's YouTube. You can also share it. We'll be out on social media and stuff, sharing it out. I want to do a special thank you to our ASL and our CART interpreters, Janine and Lynette, who were on today doing the ASL. Thank you so much. Our events have been recorded, as I said before. They will be on YouTube in a couple of weeks. You can also learn more about future events with our bit.ly/seed series link. And if you want to know, if you want to tell us about what you thought about today's program, please fill out our survey. It's on bit.ly/fall 2021 feedback. We also will have it in the slides for you all to review. And we want to invite you to the next upcoming events. So we have Reimagining Safety, which is going to be on September 23rd. We have Dismantling Barriers on October 7th. And we have a lovely curated performance of multiple performers on October 21st for the Performance as Resistance program. Stay tuned to our events by signing up for our AMP newsletter. You can do that on our website. And now I'm just going to turn it over to Adrienne for the spell.
Thank you. And thanks, Ross. I'm like hugging you, in some safe way.
Thank you. It's so good to be with you. Yeah. Grateful.
It's really good. Yeah. All right. So my spell that I wanted to share with y'all today, because I think that it is a unlocking joy spell. And it's called the Radical Gratitude spell. And I think that if we cast this spell, it's a spell to cast upon meeting a stranger, comrade, or friend working for social and environmental justice and liberation. But I think if we cast this spell as a way that we met everyone, we in 10 years could transform the world. So this is my spell. You are a miracle walking. I greet you with wonder. In a world which seeks to own your joy and your imagination, you have chosen to be free every day as a practice. I can never know the struggles you went through to get here, but I know you have swum upstream and at times it has been lonely. I want you to know I honor the choices you made in solitude, and I honor the work you have done to belong. I honor your commitment to that which is larger than yourself and your journey to love the particular container of life that is you. You are enough. Your work is enough. You are needed. Your work is sacred. You are here, and I am grateful.
Cuéntame tú quién eres, te digo de dónde soy. Háblame de